Before we open the dossier on one of the most embarrassing and classified intelligence failures of the Soviet era, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The history of the Cold War is filled with shadows, and you won't want to miss what we uncover next. East Berlin, November 1983. The German Democratic Republic was a world of gray. It was a city of concrete, damp wool, and the smell of brown coal smoke that hung low over the streets like a physical weight. To the casual observer, or a tourist allowed a day pass from the west, the city appeared functional, if austere. Trams rattled down the tracks of Schönhauser Allee, citizens queued for groceries, and the expansive surveillance apparatus of the Stasi hummed quietly beneath the surface. But for those who operated in the twilight world of intelligence, East Berlin was the most dangerous chessboard on earth. It was a place where a wrong glance could end a career, and a wrong word could end a life. In the Meat District, tucked away on a side street that received little sunlight even in the summer, sat a small establishment known as Café de Laterne, the Lantern. It was not a place for the elite. The high-ranking party officials and visiting dignitaries dined at the opulent hotels near Alexanderplatz. The Lantern was for the mid-level bureaucrats, the tired university professors, and the factory managers who wanted a quiet beer or a cup of strong, bitter coffee after a long shift. It was unremarkable in every way. The wallpaper was a fading floral print from the 1960s. The tables were heavy oak, and the windows were always slightly fogged from the heat of the kitchen. And then there was the waiter. The regulars knew him simply as Hans. He was a man of indeterminate age, perhaps 40, perhaps 50. He had thinning hair combed neatly to the side, a slightly stooped posture, and a face that was entirely forgettable. If you tried to describe him 10 minutes after leaving the cafe, you would struggle. Was he tall? Average. Were his eyes blue? Maybe brown. He was polite, efficient, and possessed the rare ability to be present without being noticed. He refilled coffee cups before they were empty. He wiped down tables with a rhythmic, hypnotic motion. He listened to the complaints of the customers about the weather or the shortages of fruit, nodding sympathetically but never offering an opinion of his own. To the Stasi informants who inevitably frequented the cafe, Hans was a non-entity. His file in the local precinct was thin, containing only his work permit, his residence registration in a small apartment 2 blocks away, and a clean bill of health. He was the perfect citizen of the GDR, quiet, obedient, and dull. But on the night of November 14, 1983, the dull routine of Café de Laterne was shattered. The raid did not begin with sirens. The KGB preferred the element of surprise. It began with the screech of tires on wet cobblestones. 3 black Volgas and a transport truck swerved into the narrow street, blocking both ends. Men in heavy coats and fur hats spilled out, their breath steaming in the freezing air. These were not the local East German police, the Volkspolizei. These were operatives of the Soviet Committee for State Security, the KGB, operating with the heavy hand that Moscow sometimes flexed within the borders of its satellite states. Inside the cafe, the conversation died instantly. The door was kicked open, the bell above it jangling violently before being silenced by the heavy boot of a KGB captain. "Nobody moves." The command came in Russian, then in harsh German. Identification on the tables. Now, there were 12 customers in the cafe that night. One of them was a man sitting in the back corner, nursing a glass of cognac he had been making last for an hour. This man was the target. The KGB had been hunting him for 3 weeks across the Eastern Bloc. But as the officers swarmed the room, overturning chairs and grabbing patrons, they paid no attention to the waiter standing behind the counter. Hans was drying a glass. He did not drop it. He did not flinch. He simply set the glass down, placed the towel on the counter, and raised his hands slowly, his face registering nothing more than the confused fear of a simple service worker caught in something he didn't understand. The KGB tore the cafe apart. They found their target in the corner. They found the microfilm he had taped under the table. They dragged him out into the night. And, just to be thorough, they rounded up everyone else as potential witnesses or accomplices. They took the university professor, they took the factory manager, and they took the waiter, Hans. As they shoved him into the back of the transport truck, the KGB captain looked at the waiter with disdain. He saw a trembling, pathetic man in a stained apron. He didn't know that he had just put handcuffs on the most dangerous intelligence asset in Berlin. Chapter 2. The Architecture of Boring. To understand why the KGB missed what was right in front of them, one must understand the concept of the gray man. In the world of espionage, there are spies who rely on charm, on disguise, on falsified papers that claim they are diplomats or businessmen. But the most effective camouflage is mediocrity. The man known as Hans had spent 4 years constructing the architecture of his boredom. He had arrived in East Berlin in 1979, drifting in from Dresden with papers that were perfect because they were real. He had taken the job at the Lantern because it offered no prospects for advancement. He lived a life of aggressive monotony. His neighbors in the communal apartment building verified this whenever the authorities asked. "Hans?" they would say. "He is quiet. He leaves at 3:00 p.m. for his shift. He returns at 11:30 p.m. He listens to classical music on the radio, but never too loud. He has no girlfriend. He receives no mail." This routine was his armor. Every morning, the man who called himself Hans would wake up at 8 a.m. He would drink tea, not coffee. He would read the Neues Deutschland, the party newspaper, cover to cover. He did not read it for news. He read it to memorize the current political slogans so he could repeat them mindlessly if asked. He walked the same route to the market. He bought the same bread. He never jaywalked. He never complained about the government. But inside the mind of the waiter was a cognitive palace of staggering complexity. Hans was not his name. His true name is still a matter of debate among intelligence historians. But in the classified annexes of the CIA and MI6, he was referred to by the codename the Sexton. He was not a gatherer of information. He was not an assassin. He was a logistician of the impossible. The Sexton was a deep cover facilitator. In a city divided by a wall where crossing from east to west was a feat that cost people their lives, the Sexton was the man you found when there was no other way out. He did not move people through tunnels or hidden compartments in cars. Those methods were for the amateurs, the desperate. The Sexton moved people through the bureaucracy itself. He weaponized the rigid, paper-obsessed nature of the East German state against itself. He forged transfer orders, medical evacuations, and diplomatic reassignments. But he never met his clients. He operated through a series of dead drops and cutouts, so complex that even the people he helped save didn't know who had saved them. The only reason he was working at the Lantern was its location. The café sat directly above a junction of pneumatic tube lines used by the nearby government ministries for internal message transport, a relic of older infrastructure that the Sexton had tapped into. From the basement of the café, accessed by a service elevator that he alone used to move crates of beer, he could intercept, alter, and reinsert internal communiques between the Ministry of the Interior and the border guards. He could turn a detain order into a deport order with a typewriter and a seal he had carved himself from a rubber heel. On the night of the raid, the Sexton had been in the middle of an operation. He wasn't extracting a person, he was extracting a list of Stasi informants operating within the West German parliament. The microfilm was supposed to be passed to a contact, the man in the corner with the cognac. The man in the corner was Colonel Valery Petrov, a KGB officer who had decided to defect. Petrov had the list. The Sexton was supposed to facilitate Petrov's exit the following morning by altering a train manifest. But Petrov had been careless. He had been followed. When the KGB burst through the door, the Sexton knew instantly that the operation was burned. Petrov was finished. The mission was a failure. Now the priority shifted from extraction to survival. As he sat in the dark transport truck bouncing over the potholes of East Berlin, the Sexton began to slow his heart rate. He let his shoulders slump. He allowed a sheen of sweat to form on his upper lip. He began to mutter to himself, repeating a recipe for potato soup, acting the part of a man whose small world had just been crushed. He needed to be invisible. He needed to be Hans. Chapter 3. The Major and the Panic. The raid was led by Major Viktor Volkov. Volkov was a rising star in the KGB's first chief directorate, a man who viewed East Berlin not as a partner nation, but as a territory to be managed. He was ambitious, brutal, and currently under immense pressure from Moscow. The defection of Colonel Petrov would be a catastrophe for Soviet intelligence. Petrov knew the names of every deep-cover sleeper agent in Bonn. If he reached the West, the entire Soviet network in West Germany would go dark. Volkov had tracked Petrov to the Lantern through good old-fashioned police work and brutality. He had broken Petrov's driver 2 days earlier. He knew the handover was happening that night. Now, standing in the wreckage of the café, Volkov felt a surge of triumph. He had the traitor. He had the microfilm. But Volkov was a perfectionist. He looked around the empty room. Who had Petrov been waiting for? Was the contact already there? Or was the contact one of the terrified civilians they had just shoved into the trucks? "Search the basement," Volkov barked at his lieutenant. "Tear the walls down if you have to. If there is a transmitter, a code book, anything. I want it." He didn't know about the pneumatic tubes. The access point was hidden behind a stack of kegs that hadn't moved in 3 years. The KGB agents overturned the tables, ripped up the floorboards in the dining area, and smashed the crockery in the kitchen. They found nothing but stale bread and cheap brandy. Volkov paced the floor. He lit a cigarette. He needed to be sure. "Take them all to the Hohenschönhausen facility," he ordered. "Petrov goes to isolation. The rest, process them, squeeze them. If anyone knows anything, I want to know before the sun comes up." The Hohenschönhausen prison was officially a Ministry for State Security remand center, but the KGB had a wing there where they operated with autonomy. It was a place designed to break the human spirit. The walls were soundproofed, the lights were kept on 24 hours a day, and the corridors were lined with carpet to muffle the sound of footsteps, ensuring that prisoners never knew when a guard was approaching. Volkov arrived at the prison an hour later. He went straight to his office and poured a drink. He felt he had won. He had stopped the leak. The other people from the cafe, the waiter, the professor, the drunk, were just loose ends. He would let his junior officers handle them. A few hours of intimidation, a background check, and then they would be released with a warning to never speak of what they had seen. This was Volkov's first mistake. He underestimated the capacity for bureaucracy to hide a monster, and he underestimated the man who was currently sitting in holding cell 4, weeping loudly and asking if he would still be able to make it to work tomorrow because the beer delivery was arriving at 8 a.m. Chapter 4. The holding cell 4 was cold. The sexton sat on the wooden bench, his knees pulled up to his chest. He was not alone. The university professor, a man named Richter, was pacing back and forth, muttering about his rights. The factory manager was sitting on the floor, staring at the wall in shock. The sexton was observing everything, but his eyes were wide and watery. He was projecting harmless distress. Inside his mind, however, he was running a diagnostic. Situation analysis, location, Hohenschönhausen. Sector B, judging by the travel time and the smell of industrial cleaner. Status, detained as a witness, collateral. Risk, high. If they check his fingerprints against the international database, he is dead. However, the East Germans and the Soviets did not share a unified automated fingerprint database in 1983. It would require a manual request to Moscow, which would only happen if he gave them a reason to be suspicious. Objective: be boring, be helpful but useless, be released within 12 hours. "They can't do this," Professor Richter stammered. "I have a lecture in the morning. I am a member of the party." The sexton looked up, his voice trembling. I left the stove on," he whispered. "In the cafe. The pilot light. If the gas builds up." Richter looked at him with disgust. "You idiot. We are in a KGB prison and you are worried about a stove?" "It's my responsibility," the sexton whined. "The owner will be so angry. I've never been late, never." He was establishing his baseline, a man of small thoughts, a man whose horizon did not extend beyond his menial job. 2 hours later, the door opened. A guard pointed at the sexton. "You, come." The sexton stood up, stumbling slightly. He let his hands shake as he held them out. The guard didn't even bother to cuff him. Why cuff a rabbit? He was led down the silent, carpeted hallway to an interrogation room. It was stark. A metal table, 2 chairs, a mirror on the wall. Behind the table sat a junior KGB lieutenant, a young man named Krupin who looked exhausted. Krupin had been up all night processing paperwork. He didn't want to be interviewing a waiter. He wanted to be interrogating the spy. "Sit," Krupin said, lighting a cigarette and not offering one. The sexton sat on the edge of the chair, clutching his apron, which he was still wearing. "Please, sir, I don't know anything." The man with the cognac. He just ordered a cognac. He didn't even tip." Krupin sighed. He opened a file folder. "Name? Hans Weber. Date of birth? March 12th, 1938. Address?" The sexton rattled off the address. He recited his ID number perfectly. He listed his parents' names, both deceased. He listed his primary school. "Tell me what you saw," Krupin said, bored. "Well," the sexton began, his voice taking on the tedious, circular cadence of a slow thinker. "I was washing the glasses. The Pilsner glasses, not the Steins, because we were low on Pilsner glasses. And I heard the door. Usually the bell rings once. Ding. But this time it was loud. Crash. And I looked up and I thought, oh no, did the hinge break? Because the hinge has been sticky since October. And then men came in with guns, very big guns. And I thought..." Krupin rubbed his temples. "Did you see the man in the corner speak to anyone?" "The man with the cognac?" "Oh yes, he spoke to me. He asked for a cognac. The good kind, not the local brandy. We have a bottle of French cognac we keep for special occasions. It costs 12 marks a glass. I told him it was 12 marks and he said..." "Did he speak to anyone else?" Krupin interrupted. "I don't think so, but the café was busy. Frau Müller was there. She was complaining about her hip. She always complains about her hip when it rains, and it was raining. You know, the cobblestones get very slippery." The sexton kept talking. He filled the air with a fog of useless, mundane details. He was drowning the interrogator in boredom. He was weaponizing the banal. Krupin stopped taking notes after 5 minutes. He looked at the waiter and saw exactly what the sexton wanted him to see. A waste of time. Chapter 5. The Glitch in the Matrix. While the sexton was boring Lieutenant Krupin to tears, Major Volkov was in the observation room next door, watching through the one-way mirror. He wasn't watching the waiter. He was reviewing the transcript of Petrov's interrogation. Petrov wasn't talking. Volkov glanced through the glass at the waiter. Something bothered him. Not a suspicion, just an itch. "He is very calm," Volkov said to the technician. "Calm?" the technician replied. "He is rambling about a dishwasher. He is sweating. He looks terrified." "Yes," Volkov murmured, "but his story, it loops. He repeats the same details in the same order. The hinge, the cognac, the hip." Volkov walked into the interrogation room. The sexton stopped talking immediately, shrinking back into his chair. Volkov loomed over him. "You are a waiter?" Volkov said. "Yes, sir. 10 years. Well, 4 years at the Lantern. Before that I was at..." "Let me see your hands," Volkov ordered. The sexton held out his hands. They were rough. The skin was red and chapped from cheap soap and hot water. The fingernails were short. There were calluses on the pads of the fingers, the kind you get from carrying hot plates and scrubbing surfaces. Volkov inspected them closely. He was looking for the telltale signs of a field agent, the callus on the trigger finger, the ink stain from coating pads, the smooth hands of an intellectual pretending to be a worker. But these hands were genuine. The sexton had made sure of it. For 4 years he had never worn gloves when he worked. He had destroyed his own hands to build his cover. Volkov dropped the hands. "Get him out of here," he said to Krupin. "He is useless. Check his apartment, verify his papers, and cut him loose. We need the cell space." The sexton let out a breath he had been holding. Not a dramatic sigh of relief, but a small, pathetic whimper of gratitude. "Thank you, sir. Thank you. Can I go to work tomorrow?" "Get out," Volkov sneered. It seemed like a victory, but as the sexton was being processed for release, a clerk made a phone call. It was a standard procedure check with the Central Registry of the People's Police. Hans Weber. Date of birth, March 12, 1938. "One moment." The voice on the other end crackled. "We have a Hans Weber, but the file shows he was hospitalized last week for appendicitis in Leipzig." The clerk frowned. He looked at the man standing at the counter, collecting his shoelaces. "Hey," the clerk said. "You had your appendix out?" The sexton froze. This was the variable he hadn't accounted for. A duplicate name. A clerical error in the chaotic East German system where files were often lost or merged. If he said yes, they would check for a scar. He didn't have one. If he said no, the file didn't match. He turned slowly. He looked the clerk in the eye. He had a split second to decide between the idiot persona and something else. "My cousin," the sexton said, a look of annoyance crossing his face. "Hans-Jürgen Weber. I am Hans-Peter Weber. He lives in Leipzig. He always gets our mail mixed up. Did he send a bill here? He owes me money." The lie was fast, plausible, and delivered with the petty frustration of a family squabble. The clerk paused. He hated paperwork. If he flagged this, he'd have to fill out 3 forms and call the Leipzig precinct. It was 4 a.m. He wanted to go home. "Fine," the clerk grunted. "Get out of here." The sexton walked out of the prison gates and into the pre-dawn mist. He didn't run. He walked with the heavy, tired gait of a man who had been up all night, but as soon as he turned the corner, his posture changed. The stoop vanished. His eyes sharpened. He checked his watch. He had been held for 6 hours. The KGB had the Café. They had his basement access. They would find the pneumatic tube tap eventually. It might take a day, it might take a week, but they would find it. And when they did, they would realize that the waiter was the only person with access to the cellar. Hans Weber was dead. The sexton had to disappear. Chapter 6. The dead drop. He didn't go to his apartment. That was the first place they would look if they changed their minds. He went to a public bathhouse in Prenzlauer Berg that opened at 5 a.m. for the shift workers. Inside a changing stall, he reached into the lining of his heavy wool coat. He pulled a loose thread, unraveling a section of the hem. Inside was a small flat key and a strip of negatives. His insurance policy. He showered, scrubbing the smell of the prison off his skin. He dressed again and left the bathhouse. He took 3 different trams, doubling back twice, watching his reflection in shop windows to see if he was being trailed. He was clean. He arrived at a nondescript tenement building in Friedrichshain. He didn't live there. He went to the basement, to a storage locker labeled Property of EM. He used the flat key. Inside was a dusty suitcase. He opened it. It contained the tools of his true trade. A West German passport, a set of clothes that looked nothing like what a waiter would wear, a tailored suit, a silk tie, a substantial amount of Deutschmarks and US dollars, and a gun, a compact Walther PPK. He stripped off his waiter's clothes. He burned the apron in the coal furnace in the corner of the basement. He dressed in the suit. He slicked his hair back, changing the part from left to right. He put on a pair of thick-rimmed glasses. In 10 minutes, Hans the waiter had ceased to exist. In his place stood Elias Vane, a Swiss businessman specializing in textile machinery imports. But Vane couldn't just leave. The city was locked down. The KGB raid on the Café meant the borders would be on high alert. Major Volkov would be watching the checkpoints. Elias sat on a crate in the dusty basement. He needed a vehicle. Not a car, a vehicle of exit. He thought about the pneumatic tubes. He thought about the trains. And then he remembered the one thing Volkov wouldn't be looking for. Volkov was looking for a spy. He wasn't looking for a victim. Part 2 of 2. Chapter 7. The Loose End. Back at the prison, Major Volkov was having a bad morning. The interrogation of Colonel Petrov was going nowhere. Petrov was a hardened veteran. He knew the techniques. He sat in silence, staring at the wall. Volkov went back to the cafe. He needed fresh air. He walked through the wreckage of the dining room. The sun was up now, casting a pale light over the overturned tables. Volkov walked behind the counter. He looked at the sink where the waiter had been standing. He saw the glass the waiter had been drying. It was perfectly clean. He looked at the register. He opened it. The cash was neatly organized. Then he looked at the floor behind the bar. There was a scuff mark, a heavy drag mark on the linoleum leading toward the kitchen door. It looked like a crate had been dragged repeatedly. Volkov followed the mark. It went into the kitchen to the service elevator. "Open this," Volkov ordered his men. They pried the elevator doors open. The shaft was dark. They went down. In the basement, behind the kegs, they found it. The tap on the pneumatic tube line. It was a sophisticated piece of engineering. A bypass valve, a diversion chamber, and a high-speed camera rig for photographing documents as they whizzed by. Volkov stared at it. This wasn't Petrov's work. Petrov was a handler, not a technician. This was infrastructure. This had been here for years. The waiter, Volkov whispered. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The trembling, boring little man with the chapped hands. "Get me the file on Hans Weber," Volkov screamed, his voice cracking. "Close the checkpoints, train stations, the Friedrichstrasse crossing, everything. Find him." Chapter 8. The Ambulance. Elias Vane, formerly Hans, knew the timeline. He knew that Volkov would find the basement within 12 hours. He had found it in 8. Elias heard the siren start up across the city. The dragnet was closing. He walked to a phone booth. He dialed a number that connected to a switchboard in West Berlin, routed through a hospital. "Dispatch," a voice answered. "Code Blue, Sector 4. Patient requires immediate transfer to Charité, then cross-transport to West Berlin for specialized surgery. Cardiac event. Authorization: Dr. Reinhardt. ID 4490 Alpha." It was a ghost authorization. Dr. Reinhardt had defected 3 years ago, but Elias had never removed his clearance codes from the Central Medical Registry. He had kept them active, updating the files remotely, waiting for a day like this. 20 minutes later, an ambulance from the Charité hospital pulled up to the corner of the block where Elias was waiting. He wasn't wearing the suit anymore. He was lying on the sidewalk, clutching his chest, his skin pale, thanks to a layer of crushed chalk he kept in his kit. The paramedics, real East German medics who had no idea they were part of a spy game, jumped out. "Male, approx 45, possible myocardial infarction." They loaded him onto the stretcher. Elias groaned, playing the part. He needed them to believe he was dying. "Get him to Charité." "No," the lead paramedic said, checking the dispatch log. "Order says immediate transfer to West Berlin. Virchow Hospital." "He's a diplomat?" They checked his pockets. They found the Swiss passport Elias had planted. "Swiss national," the medic said. "Shit. If he dies on us, it's an international incident. Drive." The ambulance screamed through the streets, sirens wailing, cutting through the traffic. The KGB roadblocks were looking for a waiter in a gray coat or a spy trying to sneak through the shadows. They weren't stopping emergency vehicles carrying dying Swiss diplomats. Chapter 9. The checkpoint. They reached the Invalidenstrasse checkpoint. The border guards stepped out, their Kalashnikovs slung over their shoulders. They signaled the ambulance to stop. The driver rolled down the window. "Cardiac arrest! Swiss national! We have authorization for emergency transfer." The guard frowned. He walked to the back of the ambulance. He looked inside. Elias lay on the stretcher, an oxygen mask over his face. His eyes were closed. He was regulating his breathing, shallow and ragged. "Papers," the guard demanded. The medic handed over the Swiss passport and the forged medical transfer order. The guard looked at the passport. The photo matched the dying man. The stamps were valid. But the guard hesitated. The radio in his booth was squawking about a Priority 1 alert for a fugitive. "I need to call this in," the guard said. "He doesn't have time," the medic shouted. "Look at the EKG." Elias, one hand hidden under the sheet, was tapping the sensor lead on his chest in a rhythmic, erratic pattern. The monitor beeped wildly. "Beep, beep, beep, beep. He's flatlining," the medic yelled. "If he dies here, you explain it to the ministry." The guard looked at the monitor. He looked at the paperwork. He looked at the furious medic. The fear of responsibility, the fear of causing a diplomatic crisis, outweighed the vague alert on the radio. "Go." The guard waved them through. "Go." The barrier lifted. The ambulance surged forward, crossing the strip of death, the raked sand, the tank traps. They passed the final barrier. They were in the west. Chapter 10. The Ghost. Half a mile past the checkpoint, the ambulance pulled over near the Tiergarten. The medics were preparing the defibrillator. "Clear!" the medic shouted. "Don't bother," Elias said, sitting up and removing the oxygen mask. His voice was calm, steady, and completely different from the groans of a dying man. The medics froze. They stared at the man who had just flatlined. "Stop the vehicle," Elias ordered. He held up the Walther PPK. He didn't point it at them, just held it loosely to show he was serious. "I am getting out here." You had a heart attack," the driver stammered. "I got better," Elias said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope of Deutschmarks. He tossed it onto the dashboard. "This is for your trouble. And for your silence. You never saw me. You took a patient to Virchow. He was admitted, and you left. If anyone asks, that is the story. If you tell the truth, you admit to smuggling a man with a gun across the border. You know what the Stasi does to people who do that." The medics nodded, terrified. Elias opened the back doors. The cold air of West Berlin rushed in. It smelled different here. It smelled of gasoline and neon and freedom. He stepped out, adjusted his suit jacket, and vanished into the trees of the Tiergarten. By the time the ambulance crew recovered their wits, he was gone. Chapter 11. The Aftermath. Major Volkov tore the apartment of Hans Weber apart with his bare hands. He found nothing. No prints, no hair. The apartment had been wiped down with industrial bleach. The clothes in the closet were generic. The books on the shelf were unread. It was as if the man had never existed. Volkov sat on the stripped mattress, panting. He knew his career was over. He had captured the defector Petrov, yes, but he had let the sexton slip through his fingers. He had had the most dangerous man in Berlin in a holding cell, and he had let him walk out because he looked like a boring waiter. The pneumatic tube tap was analyzed. The KGB realized that for 3 years the sexton had been intercepting high-level orders. He had probably saved hundreds of people. He had altered lists, deleted names, delayed arrests. He was a one-man resistance movement operating right under their noses. Moscow was furious. Volkov was recalled 2 days later. He was not executed, but he was reassigned to a radar station in Kamchatka, the furthest edge of the Soviet Empire, where he spent the rest of his days cataloging ice flows. Chapter 12. The Legacy. Elias Vane never surfaced again. There were rumors, of course, a sighting in Vienna in 1986, a mysterious consultant who helped a Chinese dissident escape Beijing in 1989, but nothing concrete. The sexton became a legend in the intelligence community. A ghost story told to young recruits at Langley and Vauxhall Cross. The man who weaponized boredom. The man who defeated the KGB with a glass of cognac and a fake appendix. Years later, after the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, researchers went into the Stasi archives. They found the file on the raid at Café de la Terne. It was thick with reports on Colonel Petrov, but near the back there was a single sheet of paper regarding the waiter. It was the release form signed by Major Volkov. In the section for Reason for Release, Volkov had written one word, scrawled in angry, jagged Cyrillic: nobody. But as history proved, he was somebody. He was the man who served coffee to monsters while he quietly dismantled their world from the inside out. So, the next time you are in a cafe and you see a waiter who seems a little too quiet, a little too efficient, just remember, you never truly know who is pouring your coffee. Thank you for listening to this Cold War story. If you enjoyed this dive into the shadows of espionage, please like the video and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe for more classified files from history. Until next time, keep your eyes open.